Hello and welcome back to my podcast called Faith is Strength. I'm Nochi Mendel. I'm speaking out of Muncie, New York, and I'm helping spread the beautiful light of spiritual living across the world. May my words and the expressions of my soul be gratifying to everyone who hears them. I pray that my ideas help pave a beautiful path in your journey called life. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for existing. The title of today's podcast is called A Breath of Fresh Outlook, Part 2. If you haven't already listened to Part 1, I would suggest that you stop this and go listen to that. This is a continuation on the topic of business, entrepreneuring, and how spirituality, or I should say where spirituality lends its bearing on business, being an entrepreneur, how our emotions and behavior, our strengths and weaknesses, how they have very much so to do with how one should and does approach business. The date of this recording is January 8th of 2019. I'm going to jump right in and continue where I left off in the previous episode, in Part 1. In Part 1, we touched on a little bit of a reflection of my own journey, a specific time frame, namely between the ages of 17 and 22, or 17 and 24. I am 26 at the time of this recording, and needless to say, my journey has progressed. So there is a little bit of a gap between where I stopped talking about my journey and where I'm holding now. I will be sure to share some more details as I find its relevance in my expressions. We then discussed whether entrepreneurs are born or are they made. A very, very interesting question, an exploration in its own right, worthy of every business person's attention and contemplation, especially those who have been on the journey and have been putting in the time to try to reach wealth or success within the business world. We concluded that the unborn, the individual who is not particularly a born entrepreneur, can still succeed and become an entrepreneur by really taking advantage of something that we call desire. Now we're going to move to the next step. After we've successfully internalized and established our desire and our resolve to never give up, it's time to focus on the things that motivate us. Motivation is what pushes us and enables us to excel consistently. Without it, we may shoot up, but fall back down even harder. If we acquire a solid plan for continuously motivating ourselves, then we are essentially purchasing an insurance policy to our endeavor of being an entrepreneur. Does that make sense? When you approach business, when you approach the pursuit of being successful within business or wealth, it's not like in spirituality or character development where you want to have ups and downs, and every time you have your down, it builds you up. In a certain sense, it is like that, but not very much so. I mean, think about it. If you go from earning $1 million one year and then down to $100,000 one year, that's not very good business, right? In that sense, you don't want that to happen. In spiritual development, in character refinement, we have this notion of falling or weakness. And because we're human and we're not angels, we need those pitfalls in order to gain motivation to build up even stronger. In business, it is not necessarily like that. You could just shoot up and continue to shoot up endlessly until you die. Many have, many do. I'm not saying this will be the case for you, but nobody goes into business thinking, hey, I want to be successful year 3 and I don't want to be successful year 4. That's just not a reality that we want to be faced with. So in business, we want something called consistency. And what drives consistency is motivation, or consistent motivation, right? What drives us in general? Think about it. What drives us? Motivation. Motivation could be a product of desire. So it starts out with desire, and then that creates motivation. And we need continuous motivation if we want to grow consistently. So motivation, if there was somehow to make motivation readily available or on a consistent basis, then you would, in a certain sense, be purchasing an insurance policy that you will succeed. But can this be done? Is it possible to create a plan, a motivation plan, that will create a consistency that we need in order to grow? Trying to navigate the windy roads of business without proper and consistent motivation is too much of a risk. Besides, the 21st century is built on insurance. It's a no-brainer. If we look at it from that sense, I mean, if it's organized in a way for our minds to understand it as I just explained it, why wouldn't we, as a prerequisite, as a starter, think about this really clearly? I'm not talking, this may apply to people who are already in the game, but very much so, and definitely for someone who is thinking about stepping into it. What is your plan for motivation? Everyone could start a business. I deal in startups. My current company is called, and let me just say that I've shifted from, right, because I ended my story saying that I was working in Amazon and I had a partnership. Well, I left the third-party selling community and I really, really fell in love with tech. I own a application and software development company, a digital agency that specializes in design, development, and marketing. It's called Expect Huge. Expect Huge has been in business for about 5 years. I've dealt, by default, due to the nature of my industry, I've dealt and continue to deal with startups on a weekly basis. I've helped dozens of businesses successfully build and launch. I know, at least from my perspective, how relatively easy it is to start a business. I also know, from my experience, how easy it is that after you started to lose motivation or not have a proper game plan, and for it to fall apart after you've started it. This is one of the reasons why the larger percentage of people who start businesses don't succeed. People putting a huge emphasis on the product, the service, the setup, and not enough of an emphasis on the game plan down the road. What you're going to do, what you're not going to do, how you're going to grow. But before I get carried away with all of that greatness, let's talk about the motivation again. What are some things that motivate us? That's a hard question to answer because for each individual, this may be something else. But in general, most entrepreneurs are motivated by one of the following. Number one, the money that they already made, right? This could be a motivator. You've tasted some money. You see what it's like to make money on your own. That sparks motivation. Number two, listening, reading, or watching entrepreneurs speak about business, success, and wealth. This also ignites a certain fire in certain people. This creates motivation. Number three, the simple desire to be wealthy. Number four, the desire to make enough money to be financially free, right? So there are these common motivations behind our pursuits. And then there are, of course, less common ones. People have personal reasons. And if you're not completely healthy, you may want to prove somebody something. The list is endless. Now, I would like to note that the reason that I did not mention money in and of itself is because money is something that we desire. And desire, as mentioned, is what gets us to where we are now. That is, working on and talking about motivation. Money in and of itself is not a motivator. It is something that we desire, and therefore it can motivate us to do what is necessary in order to acquire it. This is an interesting distinction that you need to think about, but it is a very prevalent distinction nonetheless. Making money, on the other hand, even a little bit, as I mentioned, can and does motivate. Tasting the greens is pure motivation to continue on our journey. So once you figure out what motivates you, you need to establish a plan that will keep the motivation levels high. You're also going to need a backup plan for how you'll deal with an unplanned downer or depression, right? So just like in life, you could be in business for a couple years and you're just not feeling it, or you're depressed, or you're down, or you're not motivated, right? So you need to have a backup plan. Considering that the journey to success may take some years, you have a very high chance of dealing with emotional roadblocks. How are you going to emerge from them is the key to your continued growth. Think about that clearly. The goal is to have a plan how you will continue to motivate yourself. This may seem like a silly step, but I assure you that it is not. You will not believe what kind of goals and checklists I have made for myself. It is what keeps me on edge every day. I love to knock items off those lists each day. I mean, seriously, utilize whatever tool you want to. I'm a freak on Trello. Everything's organized. Every goal, every milestone, checklists. How do you know if you're actually achieving goals? You think about it every day. It's not enough. Come on. How do you know you're actually getting somewhere? Don't be afraid to document, because what you see in black and white on paper, what you see on the checklist doesn't lie unless you're lying to yourself and you're checking off stuff that you didn't do. But the checklist doesn't lie. Your mind, oh yeah, your mind lies to you. you'll trick yourself to justify your laziness. So you may have 10 goals for 2019. You'll only achieve 3, but your mind will make excuses for you and you'll feel good about it. You'll feel okay, you'll feel sound. The checklist doesn't lie. The checklist just sees black and white. You said you wanted to achieve these 10 goals. You only achieved 3. You're a slacker. That's why it's important to put things down, make things solid, make them concrete. Don't be afraid. So I'm kind of working through the various stages. If you haven't noticed, I'm kind of building I guess you could say a structure for how to approach business or being an entrepreneur in general with some very, very strong and simple principles. But if you combine them all, and I'll try to summarize it towards the end of this mini series, but if you combine them all, you'll see a proper structure for approaching and finding success. The next step in this process is outlook. In truth, outlook should be chapter 1, but I realized that this concept is not as practical for people. So I went with something more tangible, like desire. But quite honestly, I believe that outlook, attitude, and perspective play the biggest roles in the professional arena. Where do we acquire proper outlook? The answer is education. The right education is what bestows upon us the right outlook. Crappy education does the opposite. I don't want to slip away into a whole topic about education or the lack thereof in this world, but I do want to briefly focus on what does matter: you and your current outlook. The perspective and outlook that you currently carry could be your biggest friend or your biggest enemy. If you are blessed and you grew up or attained a positive and healthy outlook prior to listening to this, then good for you, because that puts you plenty ahead of the clan. If you are not so fortunate and you know your perspective to be negative, always see the bad, afraid, incapable type, then you are going to have to work on that first. There is absolutely no way that you can be a healthy entrepreneur while having the wrong or negative type of outlook, especially in our times. Millennial entrepreneurs are a whole different breed than past generation entrepreneurs. With the whole social playground and the way that we are evolving socially and what is acceptable and what is not and what we care about and what we don't, and with high tech and all that stuff, you need to adapt a positive, healthy, always focus on the good type of outlook. I'm not saying that we don't have those old school, angry old white men type of business people in the arena today. The very much so, it is still populated greatly, but that will die out, and all this new ta-ta-ta that we see is going to become the norm. So we have to get with it. It's not a choice. It's you either get with it or you fall behind, especially if you're starting out as a new startup right now, or if you want to get into business now, you got to get on the train. An entrepreneur is the opposite of negative. We live and breathe positivity and subsequently creativity. All right, do you see the parallel? Positivity, creativity. You need to have a positive outlook in order for creativity to have a vessel in which it could be sparked. Creativity is potential and needs to be sparked somewhere. It is not sparked in an environment, in a frequency of negativity and small-mindedness. An entrepreneur knows for a fact that he or she can accomplish anything that they put their minds to. And they don't allow themselves to doubt that for a second. You understand? This is an outlook. This is a personality. You remember what I said in the last podcast, in the last episode? Mimic entrepreneurial behaviors and habits. The born entrepreneur doesn't allow himself to be negative, doesn't allow himself to doubt that his idea is a bad idea. If it pops into the mind, you kick it out. If this is not natural for you, if you're a procrastinator, or if you doubt and fear and worry, you have to literally fake it till you make it. And if you can't, then you won't make it. You have to get on the wavelength of these habits, of these positive habits. I'll say it again. Entrepreneurs know for a fact that they can accomplish anything that they put their mind to. Notice how I use the word know and not believe. That's because you need to graduate from speculation and enter the state of knowing and being. I think The Secret, law of attraction, positivity. You need to operate on a frequency of knowing, feeling, being. That's why if you look back at episode 1 where I said, I am success, I live success, it is because I operate on a frequency of success. Not only is that I don't believe that I'm successful, I tell people that they are looking at success when they look at me. Do you get the picture? I'm not talking about egotism or megalomania, heaven forbid. I'm not crazy. I know exactly where I am and what I have. I'm talking about the inner feeling of confidence, positivity, and success that you should be feeling throughout your journey in life and especially in business. There is no room for fear, doubt, and negativity. When I approach a new project or an idea, let's say a new app or a concept, do you think I allow myself to doubt whether or not it will turn successful? I absolutely do not. Of course, those thoughts automatically seep through the cracks, but I patch it right up and I reassure myself. Beginning the thought process of recording this mini-series, I did proper due diligence. After learning how hard it may be to properly articulate every point and everything should flow nicely and come together in a beautiful package and all that stuff, I was very unmotivated. But do you know how long those thoughts and feelings lasted? 30 minutes. I took a break from thinking about it, sat in a hot bathtub and relaxed, then returned to my computer and continued making notes. So yes, these little doubts pop into my head, but I block them out and remind myself that I will conquer this obstacle and find a way around it. If there is a will, there is a way, right? That's what I was taught growing up. Education and positivity, self-confidence, and every subject in that criteria should be learned prior to entering the entrepreneurial world, because without it, you may reach a sudden dead end. Why even begin with improper tools? The bookstores are full of self-help books. Begin by educating yourself in positive thinking, belief, and faith in yourself, and then move to self-confidence, speaking, and communication. Once you have those down pat, move to the business aisle and start learning about success relating to the business world or the industry that you're interested in. I personally have so little time for reading these days. And when I do, I'd rather read a self-help book than a Mark Cuban book. Nevertheless, I'll treat myself to a quick, Patrick Ben-David on YouTube or Gary Vee or Eric Thomas. So you see that when I do want some downtime, I educate myself in the areas that will continue to motivate and teach me how to cope with my life and business ventures. But I'll talk more about time well spent in the next step. The conclusion here is this. We need to be humans of immense positive and good outlook in order to be an entrepreneur. And the only way to attain that is through proper education. Biology and math are cool, but they won't teach you self-confidence. History and chemistry are great as well, but learning them doesn't mean that you're ready to deal with the stresses of owning a business and dealing with angry clients. Public schools and college don't give you the tools you need in order to be an entrepreneur, unless you take specific classes relating to the subjects outlined above. That means that in most cases, we need to learn it on our own. And it's waiting on the shelf, on iTunes, on Kindle, ready when you are. The content is out there. How motivated are you? How much time are you investing in that versus Netflix, YouTube, entertainment, TV, getting high, sleeping in? There are two types of entrepreneurs. Those who seek to excel and maximize the potential of their business, industry, or service, and those who solely desire to make money and they are ready to achieve that by any means available, within the scope of their capabilities, of course. In the past couple years of me being in business, a lot has changed. Although at 21 years old, all I thought about was building my Amazon business, I began to do other work as well. Nothing was getting in my way of making money wherever I can. That naturally evolved into me being a person of multiple traits. I went from selling on Amazon to building websites, to graphics, to social media marketing, to business consulting and more. There was and still is nothing that ties me down to one business. As long as I'm fulfilling my obligations in each company, there is absolutely nothing in my agreements that states that I can't own another business or record a podcast in my basement at 1 a.m. about being an entrepreneur. And therefore I am. Not because I have to, because the idea originated, I pondered it and thought it would be cool. And in this light, projects and business ventures don't need to have a million reasons behind them. They need to be realistic, doable, and profitable. If you look at corporate business, the way that they evaluate things, the way that they complicate things is so convoluted often You don't have to do all of that due diligence necessarily. Remember, realistic, doable, and profitable. Less talk, more action. If your ideas meet those criteria, go for it. If I sat and thought about making a podcast about entrepreneuring for 3 years, I would never end up doing it. And by the time I put the content out there, it may be irrelevant. In business, there's no room for procrastination. Think logically, unbiasedly, and without emotion. Is it realistic? Is it doable? Is it profitable? Then go for it. And I don't want to indicate that you cannot do something out of pleasure. You sure can. And those endeavors can often be profitable as well. But that is not my focus here right now. Because if your work is hobby related, then you must do it out of love only. You have to make a choice. Are you in business to make money, or are you doing things out of love? I do my podcast because I enjoy it. I do it out of love. I don't care if it's profitable or not. But neither do I rely on it as a source of income. So over the past 2-3 years, as it unfolded, I found myself managing and juggling a nice handful or two of serious projects. It was this new league that actually started to make me feel like an entrepreneur. Struggling to cope with the stress of the sheer amount of responsibilities I carry forced me to up my already high ante of methods in organization, time management, motivation, and health, right? So we could often be in business, own a company, be busy with our company, but we still don't feel like we're, it's not tasteful on the tongue. You don't feel like an entrepreneur. You don't feel like you reached your calling. You don't feel like, you'll know when you've reached a good place. It'll make sense. You'll be good at it. You'll love it. Because I was busy with a handful of projects and the responsibilities were growing and the stress subsequently was automatically growing, it forced me to get better at organization, time management, motivation. I needed more motivation. I needed to work on my health. Sitting behind a computer for 10, 15 hours a day, often more, beats your body down. I began to train myself how to think in business, not so much what to think. The thoughts entrepreneurs have come naturally. You don't have to worry about that. The more you work, hustle, and experience, the more thoughts and ideas come to you. But what doesn't just come to you so easily is methods. In other words, how to think. Let me do an example. If you are having communication problems with a client or a team member, you may be inclined to find a better solution by implementing a new strategy that will yield a better outcome. Say the problem is that you're currently using email. Then you may think to yourself that using WhatsApp would yield better results. So you go and you open up a WhatsApp group and begin to communicate there. I taught myself how to view a dilemma, how to feel about a dissatisfied client, how to deal with a business's day-to-day struggles and growth. You understand? It's similar to learning math. It's a formula. Once you learn the formula and internalize it, business-related things don't upset, quote, upset, unquote, you anymore. People say, it upsets me. Clients don't, quote, annoy. Dead ends don't make you feel like you need to give up. Why? All these descriptors, we don't even think about. These stuff are so subconscious. We're so used to operating on these frequencies that this is what we default to. So when we step into business, it's no different. It's just bang, it's right there. Why? Because in this mathematical business formula, we only multiply in twos, even positive numbers. In other words, we teach ourselves how to multiply and then follow the rules, meaning we learn the ABCs, the mathematics of being an entrepreneur. And as a result of following the formula, we never succumb to anything other than the equation. I don't know if this analogy is making sense to you. It may be a little complex, but business, being an entrepreneur, is a different animal. It's a different world. It doesn't play by the rules of your social life, your emotional life, your relationship. It plays by a different set of rules. It's a different equation. Once you learn the mathematics, once you learn the equation, then you'll know how to solve each step. Then you'll know how to grow. You'll know how to solve each thing that comes your way. Now let me jump into the next step. The next step is about time well spent. You have to prioritize. You have to work on things that matter first. Once you're in business and you're in the so-called game, one of the main components for consistent, healthy growth is prioritization. This can be done in a number of ways, utilizing a number of tools or applications, but is an absolute must. There is no way that you can manage all your tasks and activities efficiently without putting it into perspective. If you can, then you don't have enough tasks outlined. Real entrepreneurs always have 40 hours worth of tasks or activities for every day. You know that literally they have more that they need to do every day than they could possibly do in the 24 hours that the day is. It's literally like that. And any real entrepreneur and business owner knows that. So if you have 5 items on your list, then you're doing something wrong. This will teach you how to be a quicker thinker. This will teach you how to move on quickly without dwelling on things for too long. This will teach you how to spend uptime on the right things and downtime on the right things, meaning the hours that you do dedicate or that you do lend into your ventures and your activities and your business activities, you'll learn how to spend it on the right things. And the hours that you're not spending on business, you'll also learn how to spend them on the right things. Believe it or not, the hours that you spend not during business hours matter tons. It matters what you're doing then, because it has a direct effect on the hours that you do spend on business. And finally, you'll come to organizational effectiveness and evaluation without fear, without shying away from it, to evaluate the effectiveness of your organization and of your organizational skills and of the organization time well spent. I feel like every point, every step is so strong and so important that I almost want to say, this is the step, that, but I really feel like that about all of them. And that's why they're all here. I'm only holding by step number 5, but I could talk for hours just about time well spent. It is so important. You cannot be a successful entrepreneur, business person, if you don't know how to properly manage your time, dedicate the right amount of time to the right thing. This is a skill that you need to learn and improve on forever, as long as you're in business. This is a great tool for your personal life as well. And often when people learn these skills in business, it ends up reflecting onto their personal life, and that's great. But for business, unlike personal life where you could get away with not being very organized, in business you have to. If you want to be successful, you have to learn organizational skills. So now I'm going to go over, in summary, I'm going to go over some of the first 5 steps that we discussed before I close out this episode. And it seems like we'll have about 1 or 2 more episodes that will complete this mini-series. Step 1 was determining if you are a born or made entrepreneur, because it matters. Understanding your psychology, your makeup, your DNA matters. Step 2 was decision. Once you understand that, it's decision time. Don't feel rushed. You should feel it. In spiritual living, we are taught to really own and feel good about our decisions and to stick with them, to see them through. So sit on it. Think about all that it entails and make a decision. And if you make that decision, and we can move to the next step, we look at step 3, motivation and excelling. That was today's episode. A motivation plan. Motivation is what's going to drive you. It's your battery. It's your fuel. Do you have a plan for the fuel not to run out, for you to have the significant amount of power? Step 4 was outlook. Learning about, getting educated about outlook. If you don't already have a great positive outlook, to get educated and change your outlook. And step 5 is time well spent. I don't think I've shared nearly enough about spending time well, and perhaps in the next episode I will. But we already have our first 5 steps outlined, and with God's loving grace in the coming 2 episodes, we'll complete the remaining 5 steps. The way that I conceptualized this was there are 10 steps to this whole approach to business and being an entrepreneur or becoming one. And I suppose 4 episodes could cover all of it. And I'm happy and feel privileged to be able to record this piece. As I mentioned on my last episode, business is a huge part of many people's life. It is a huge part of my life. This is a topic I feel very passionate about. It's a topic that millions and millions of people feel passionate about because so many people are in and or are going into business, and even people who work for other people or who have any kind of significant position usually have opinions and feelings about business or how they're treated or how they want to be treated or what's wrong or what's right or what they want to do. So this is a very, very important topic. And I hope some of these basics, some of these simple principles will be able to help anyone who's struggling or trying to find a light, trying to navigate the complexities of this. In terms of spiritual living, the past 4 steps that I mentioned, which were time well spent, outlook, motivation, and decision, All of these functions play a huge role in spiritual living as well, in healthy living. I don't think I need to say it, but I'll say it anyway. Any of these tools, unless the distinction is made otherwise, but any of these tools that you're learning here about business can be applied to your personal life, to your spiritual journey. And indeed, I in my personal life borrow. When I learn something in emotional development, I carry it into business, see if it finds its place there, and vice versa. If I learn something valuable, and believe me, I do learn many valuable lessons in business from mistakes, from dealing with clients, I carry them over into my personal life. This is part of what mindfulness should gift us with. When you stop, when you take a couple minutes out of your day to meditate or just reflect, do some introspection, think about what you went through that day, what happened, the conversations you had, the actions you did, the lessons you learned. Try to consciously pull those into your other aspects of life. If it's in your personal life, pull it into business. If it's in business, pull it into your personal life. There are specific things that matter in personal life and in social life that don't matter in business. And I'm trying to make it my business to mention them. But in general, good principle, good lessons could be carried over. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to this. Until next time, God bless you.